All right. So, Ankit, your question was about when you went to go to track and say clean up trackers, and right now it's set to auto tracks only. But if you go to all trackers and you click fix, you're like, what the hell? It's getting rid of so many trackers, and now it's like it's deleted so many tracks. So I'm gonna undo that. Really, this tool, Cleanup Trackers, is really meant for auto tracks. And that's because for supervised tracking, it's assuming that you're really supervising and you're really checking each track to make sure that it's accurate. What this does is that it is, if I close this, what it's doing is it's looking at the 2D track that you have, and then it looks at the when it creates the 3D point. If your tracks are accurate, if everything lines up and everything is good, then this should be in the center. The fact that it's off and that it's kind of off to the side a bit, that means that there's some errors in your track. It's either like it wasn't able to reconstruct the scene accurately, and so it's doing the best it can, but you can see that it's not like perfect. And in this case here on this frame, it's off by like 13 pixels from where the center should be. So, so that's how it figures out which ones should be deleted. So if you go to clean up trackers, it's looking for tracks on frames where the error rate is over 12. And it's looking for just trackers that have generally a high error rate. And then it's going to delete those. If I say select those tracks, you can see there's a lot of trackers that have high error rates on them. So generally speaking, I only use this if I use auto tracking, because when I use auto tracks, there's so many tracks that it would take a long time for me to go through and manually check each one. So I use this as like a shortcut. But if you're supervising the tracks, then when you come over here, it's assuming that you've really checked and that you've really that they're accurate. But when I look at this, I can see right away that there's a few tracks that are not accurate. And I'm talking about these two over here in particular. Because the tracker trails are on, you can sort of see the path. And if I look at the path at this one, I look at the path at that one, and then I look at the path of this one, you notice how this one is a lot noisier. There's a lot more quick, abrupt movements, whereas this one is pretty smooth, just with a couple of abrupt movements. And the same one is over here, and the same general one is over here. But this one, it looks very different. And same thing with this one. The path looks very different than the other ones. So I can tell right away that these two tracks are probably causing problems. And the thing is, if you have 50 auto tracks or 100 auto tracks on a frame, then if a couple of them are off a little bit, it's usually not a big deal because they get averaged out. There's so many good ones that a few that are off by a few pixels is not really a big deal. Whereas with this, there's only a few trackers on the frame right now, and if two of them are off by quite a bit, that can screw up your whole track. So if I go and I look at this tracker over here, and I go to the tracking tab, and I can see, especially early on, this is bouncing around all over the place. And it eventually does settle down, and it eventually does give a decent track. And then at the end, I can see it slides again, like right off from where it should be. So what I would do for this is, I'm going to unlock it, and then I'm going to just go forward. And what I'm also going to do is I might get rid of the solution that you have here right now. So I'm going to go to the solver, and if you just hit X, it just deletes the 3D solve and gets rid of it. So I'm going to go back to the tracking tab, and now I'm just going to go forward, and I'm going to hit 5 on my keyboard to put it in the center of the frame, and I can see right there the big jump. So I'm just going to manually, and I'm just moving this box over here. You can move it in here too, but I find this just easier. And then I'm going to go forward, and then eventually it turns off. Okay, so I got rid of the movement that was there at the end. And then over here, this one's looking pretty good for most of it. And then right there, I see like a huge jump. And even here, there's a bit of a jump. So now I'm going to make sure I'm tracking in this direction, I'm going to zoom in a bit, and I'm going to go forward, and I'm just going to, make sure that there's no big jumps. And if I see jumps, then I'm going to have to fix it. And again, I'm looking at like where the motion blur is. You can also look at how the other tracks are moving around, and you can use that as a clue for where this one should be positioned. And then I often go back and forth just to make sure that I don't see any big jumps in the frame. So I'm often going back and forth and then making corrections when I know they need to be made. What you can also do, and this can sometimes help with tracking, if you have a lot of tracks on the frame that you know are pretty good, you can go up here to track and change it from steady camera to handheld, use others. Now sometimes this doesn't really make it much better. I can see over here, that's because there's keyframes there. Just delete those keyframes. Sometimes on difficult shots it doesn't make that much of a difference, but it's worthwhile just to give it a try, because sometimes it does work. It just makes it that the predictive pattern of where it's going to go is sometimes more accurate. So now this one, if I scrub through, I can see that that one is staying pretty, staying true right up until it gets deleted, but it stays locked on there. Now on this one, same sort of thing. It goes right here, and then I see, like I can see a bit of jumping around, especially like right there. You see how it jumps right off. Now it's tracking like this area when it should have been over there. So I'm just going to back up a bit, and I'm going to track forward. I might just get rid of all the keyframes here, if it lets me. Maybe I'll just delete it and just drop it down myself. Hit C, click. So, make sure it's going the right direction. So whenever I notice that it flies off, and jumps onto another area, and I'm not just hitting the space bar and letting it play, because I know that the stuff that's on the ground, I know that that's difficult to track. So I'm literally looking at this part frame by frame. If it was a more easier tracking point, then yeah, I may hit the space bar and use the key smooth and all that stuff. But the stuff on here on the ground can make a big difference. So I've just corrected those two tracks, and now I'm going to solve it again. And now my error rate is down to 1.2, and before it was at like 4. And now I can go in and, if you look at the tracker radar, that also gives us a good indication of tracks that might be off. So for example, like right over here, this tracker 9, on the next frame over, or the next frame before it disappears, you see it's right here. I'm going to hit 5 to put this in the center. If I go one frame forward, it's bouncing off, and now it's like over here. And because it was accurate the whole time, it's putting the 3D point where it should be, and we can see our 2D track is kind of bounced off there. So I'm just going to go back to the tracking tab, unlock it, and push it to where I know it should go in that corner. So I can fix that one there. And I'm just looking in general for where that tracker radar gets really big. So I can see right here on this frame, if I go forward a bit, let me just select this one and hit 5. So I can see it's right in the corner there, and then right at the beginning it's sliding, and now it's not in the corner anymore. So I'm just going to back up a couple frames. I'm going to unlock it, and I'm just going to delete. Why is this not letting me delete? I can just turn it off there. Okay, so I have that one. Now this one over here, you're trying to, I don't even know what it is that you're trying to track because it's so, like, there's not a lot of detail here. Like over here, yeah, you can track this stuff. This stuff, there's high contrast, but this is just too faint. I'm just going to get rid of that. I think that tracker was just bouncing around the whole time. Over here, I see another big tracker radar. It gets bigger. And this one too, actually. Maybe my correction there needs a bit of work. Let me just go to this one. And right before, yeah, a few frames there, I'm just going to have it, I'm going to unlock it. It's going to be looking in this direction. And then I can hold down Shift, right click, and I'm going to actually turn it off here on that frame and then lock it. So I just got rid of the last couple frames. And then I think, yeah, this one here, sorry, mine over here. I'm just going to take that and unlock it. And then that just turned it off on that frame. Okay, so now if I go back and solve it again, now the error rate is at 1.02, so that's a lot better. And again, I can look through the tracker radar and see if there's any like really big warnings. Again, over here, whoops, I guess what happened here? Right there, I'm just gonna go to trackers, go over here, Shift right click, that truncated it. You just turn it off on that frame. So I'm just shortening the lifespan of that tracker. Go back to the solver, resolve. Now the error rate just got underneath 1. And if I kind of scrub through here, I don't really notice that tracker radar getting super big. You know, this one here is a little bit noisy, but it's a lot better than what it was. You know, right here on that frame, that track might be off a little bit because you can sort of see for most of the shot, it's like right in that corner. And then on this frame right here, the center of it is like more on the floor. So I could just go to my trackers, unlock it, make sure I select it, unlock it, move it over so it's in the right position, and then go to the solver, resolve it. Now it's 0.96 instead of 0.99, you know, it's like small increments. And there you go. So now it's looking much more accurate than it was before. I could go and I could select the points that I know are on the ground. So I can just grab a bunch of these points here, go to the summary panel, actually go forward a bit and maybe grab this and that. Go to the summary panel, hold down Shift and click on the place button. So now if I go and I look at the quad perspective view and lock myself in here, make sure I am there, and then hit 5 so I'm not centered to view. And now when I go here and I hit play, hopefully that's going to be locked into place. And if I look at the path, you want to make sure that it's a pretty, relatively smooth path. Of course, I'm walking when I took this, so there's going to be some up and down movements as I take a step and, hit the ground. But overall, the path from a certain distance should look relatively smooth. There shouldn't be any abrupt changes in the motion of it. So hopefully this helps. This makes sense.